everyone, and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. It is time for our epic Champions League review, blow by blow. My name is Taylor Rockwell, your attempting to rhyme temporary host. Now on with the intro. Is it as good as Ryan's would have been? Almost. The phase-inning phased its most phaziest phase. A total of 63 goals scored had us all in a haze. Liverpool, Barca, Arsenal, and Inter finished at the top, while Atleti, Leverkusen, Lille, and Villa rounded out the top 8 spots. Man City avoided a stumble against Club Brugge, but their eventual victory lap had Pep kicking a cooler. I went with Ryan's accent there. Benfica topped Juve with goals from Pavlidis and Kokju, but 12 points was enough for the old lady to sneak through. PSG smashed Stuttgart, as did the opponent of Feyenoord. Yes, Lille put their Dutch counterparts to the proverbial sword. Dortmund is good again. Milan were not. Leipzig's Champions League form remained anything but hot. So it's on to the knockout rounds, which should make for simpler viewing consumption. At least I hope that's the case for the hater of streaming services, Graham Ruthven. Hello, Graham.
Hello, Taylor Rockwell. Bravo. I'll give you a round of applause. What I loved about that was, unlike Ryan Bailey, it was quite clear that you had not visited rhymingdictionary.com, and because there's no way any service would have rhymed, what was it, Club Brugge with...
And Kula. Kula. Yes, I'm not sure that should have counted. I was really excited to get Brugge in there and then realized not much rhymes with Brugge. I did not consult rhymezone.com or whatever it is that Ryan goes with. But Graham, how was your streaming situation yesterday? Fun? Easy? Simple? Not at all infuriating?
None of the above. I mean, to be honest, in the UK it was a bit of a nightmare because our equivalent of Galazzo was stuck behind a paywall to a service that nobody has, and everyone was complaining about it. So I actually ended up watching Galazzo yesterday. Did not envy the job that Nico Cantor had on that show, keeping across 18 games. We're obviously going to try and do our best to sum up things here. I think we're going to stay away from for the most part, with most matches, stay away from the sort of granular analysis and try and focus on the bigger picture, because there's just no way we could consume 18 matches in the space of 12 hours, but we're going to give it a go.
I mean, you could have if you'd really, really dedicated yourself, Graham. Unfortunately, you wanted things like sleep and family. Well, rounding out our crew for this phase-hitting recap show, it's surname and then given name Lowry, Joe.
Wow. Before we started recording, I want everybody to know that Taylor's like, I might need a couple of shots at this. We'll get it. And then he absolutely nails it. Mr. One Take Wonder over here. Taylor, that was fantastic. You asked about Graham's experience watching these games.
I did.
I thought we all agreed just to watch all of Sturm Graz RB Leipzig because that game meant so much. I've got pages and pages and pages on that game and that game alone.
Yeah, we're doing a solid 30 minutes on Young Boys Red Star Belgrade, right?
Excellent. I'm there, guys. I am absolutely there on today's show.
Joe, if I called your bluff and asked you to name me 3 Sturm Graz players, are you able to achieve that feat?
I can do 2.
Oh, I can do less than Graham.
Max Johnson and Mika Biereth. There we go, 2. I still fell short of your challenge, Taylor.
Joe, follow-up question. Would you know if Graham were making those 2 names up? Because I certainly would not.
I hate to say it. I never like to BS my way through this stuff because there's so much soccer, and I feel like people think that we're able to watch everything. I don't watch much of the Austrian league, and secret, I didn't really watch much of that game yesterday either. So Graham could be completely making those names up, and I would never know. This was a wild experience. Obviously, I did not do what I just said. I did watch Galazzo as well, which I've never watched before. I've never watched Galazzo. I don't really like watching soccer games that way, if I'm being totally honest, for the most part. I like to actually get a feel for what happens in the games. And unfortunately, you don't get that whether you're watching MLS 360, which I've only done once or twice on midweek games during the MLS season, or something like Galazzo. Not to devalue that as a product, it's just not for me. And I don't think it's really what I tend to bring to these kinds of shows. But I got to say, fellas, I was stoked to watch Galazzo yesterday. I don't think the stack all 18 games in the same slot is great for people who actually like to watch soccer.
Yep.
But I do think that it was great for people who like drama and chaos, and that's absolutely what we got. I love that in Galazzo yesterday, in the pregame show, because I thought games started at noon my time, they only started at 1. Time zones are confusing. So I was in early. I was ready. I was locked and loaded. And they brought on Scott Hansen. And Taylor, you might know who Scott Hansen is. I don't anticipate Graham will know who Scott Hansen is. Taylor's eyes are saying he doesn't know who that is. It is the host of NFL Red Zone, Scott Hansen. And Scott Hansen does this every single Sunday, looking around the NFL and flipping between games and bringing energy and bringing what Nico Cantor brought. And I love that they brought him on for a pregame spot, and he and Nico got to talk shop for a little bit. And it was just fun. It made me excited. I got in from that moment on. This was crazy. I don't know if I ever want to do it like this again, but man, I don't think I'll forget this viewing experience yesterday.
Between him and the dancer they brought out at the end to have Carragher and Richards dance, they had an interesting green room yesterday over at CBS Studios. But Joe, I think you've laid it out well. That normally we try to go through at least a few games in more detail and kind of talk about the tactics and the trends and what we noticed, and we'll do a little bit of that today.
Yeah, for sure.
But with so many games on the final day, I don't think that's the goal, and I don't think that's what people intended when they came up with this format. Graham, would you agree that I think it's more about the drama and the chaos and the who's scoring and where they scoring and jumping all over the place? It felt like that was what we were going for, the drama, as Joe said, and I feel like we got a good amount of drama.
Yeah, absolutely. As I made it, there were only 6 inconsequential matches out of 18 in the final round here. And you're right, Taylor, this whole format had been building towards this final day of chaos, decision day, whatever we're calling it. And it felt very much built for Golazo. Like, those two things went hand in hand. Like, that way of consuming soccer, consuming sport, red zone, all those things. The Champions League, I think, or UEFA looked at that and said, let's adapt our format to that style of broadcasting. So that's why I think yesterday it worked so well for Golazo. Obviously, with this format, there were 2 lines of consequence. The first line being to make the top 24, which gets you through to the next round. But there was also the line of consequence for the top 8. So those top 8 teams make it through to the last 16 automatically. But from teams numbered 9 to 24, those teams go into a play-in round, and then the winners of those ties go through to the last 16. So I saw a lot of people complaining yesterday that the top teams made it through ultimately, and if you look at the teams that were actually cut adrift below the 24 line, not so many big clubs in there. I mean, I think maybe Leipzig were potentially the only big club in that bracket. I would argue on the flip side, and look, I've been an advocate of this format from pretty early on, I would argue that the likes of PSG and Bayern Munich and Real Madrid and Manchester City aren't through yet. They haven't qualified yet in the way that they would have in the old format. So I'm still hopeful that there is some excitement to come next month.
Joe, were there teams that you were particularly excited or interested to watch with the sort of top 8, top 24 ramifications in place? I think we had talked about Man City Brugge being one of the bigger ones. I assume that was going to be like a 6-0 win for City. It was a little bit closer. But were there other ones that you were particularly captivated by or looking forward to checking out?
The other one that I paid especially close attention to was PSG Stuttgart, because there were some real impact moments in that game for the fringes of that top 24. City Brugge, man, now I feel pressure to do Brugge as well, even though I'm usually a Bruges guy. This is weird. City against Bruges was the game that Golazo defaulted to, right? That's the game they started on. That's the game they would go back to when there was nothing else going on. And I think that's telling in terms of City at the end of the day. They started the evening in 25th place. So they started outside that top 24. They needed a win. Like practically speaking, they needed to make sure that they got a win to hop above that line and stay there. And as it turns out, they were the only team who started out and went in, right? They were the only team on the evening, I believe, who started outside that top 24 and ended the evening inside the top 24.
There must be another one. There has to be. Was it the other one, Lille, I think? Because 2 fell out, AC Milan and
No,
Atalanta.
what I mean, Grim, is Man City started the evening in 25th place in this entire giant table. If there had only been 7 match days instead of 8, they would have been out, right?
You're correct.
There was plenty more shuffling up top, and we'll get to that. But City were the only team that were going to go home and not play any more Champions League games this year.
Yeah,
and they changed their fates. So that was the one that I was most interested in. On the flip side, I believe that Stuttgart, in that game against PSG that I was talking about, they were the only team to drop out of that top 24. They started the evening in 24th place. They could not afford a loss. It didn't seem like they could afford a loss to PSG. And that's exactly what happened. Ousmane Dembele made extra sure of that. PSG, I thought, were excellent in that game. They had some just beautiful attacking moments. And I thought the front line dynamics with Barcola on the left and Dembele kind of playing a little bit more through the middle at times with Kvaratskhelia sort of lurking in the background in all the narratives around PSG right now. That was a fun moment. But Stuttgart were the only team to drop out of that top 24. So if I do have one point of criticism for this, I know that there is jeopardy around the top 8, and that stuff matters. Maybe it will feel like it matters more to me after we play the playoffs and you see some good teams going home from this next round. I sort of felt like I was missing a little more chaos around the 24 line. Maybe that's just not feasible, right? Maybe that's me asking too much, and I think it probably is, given just how many games there are for the table to mostly settle with the good teams at the top and the bad teams at the bottom, which is exactly what we saw. There were 9 teams eliminated heading into Wednesday, and they were most of the usual suspects outside of Leipzig, as we've already talked about. But I would have loved if there was like even one more game where there's a team that is fighting to get into the top 24, because it felt like to me yesterday, that's all that matters. Like, if you're in the top 24, you buy yourself another chance to continue going here. We didn't quite get as much of that, but I still enjoyed yesterday.
We didn't get the scenario I wanted, Joe, of a goal scored in one game and the fans react in another match and a team kind
decision
of
day
has
stuff.
A little bit more momentum. And we didn't really get that. Certainly with the 24, the line of 24, you're absolutely right. I was talking about further up the table with Lille and AC Milan and Atalanta and those teams. But and the counterpoint, I do think this format is an improvement. The counterpoint to that is, from the Big Five leagues last season, the teams that went out after the group stage in the Big Five leagues last season were Manchester United, Newcastle, Lens, Sevilla, and Union Berlin. This season, it was Stuttgart, Bologna, Leipzig, and Girona. I think that's interesting to a point, because you would say Manchester United and Newcastle are bigger teams that went out of the competition this year. I would argue I think that's just largely down to Manchester United being bad, and Newcastle, if you cast your mind back to last season, got a horror draw as a pot 4 team without any Champions League history. But that is an interesting point, Joe, and that is a counterpoint to some of the stuff that I've been saying about this format being an improvement.
I still think it is an improvement, because we ended up enjoying these games, and I think it made for fewer dead rubbers, a group stage that was, a phase-inning stage that was more engaging overall. But I still think Joe's point is it's pretty well taken, that I forget what the total number of games was. Like, it's not just 36 times 8, because everybody played each other. So it's 144 games to eliminate 12 teams is a lot of games to get rid of only 12, but it does sort of leave us with some very tasty matchups, some very exciting ones. Let's start with the teams that we won't be seeing from now on very briefly. Graham, you ran through them quickly there. Of the teams that have been eliminated, for either of you, are there any that maybe you would have expected to have made it to the next round? Bologna had a very strong season last year. They lose their manager. They lose a lot of players. Kind of hard to see them getting through, but maybe Stuttgart, maybe Girona, maybe Leipzig were the ones that I thought we could have seen in the knockout phase.
Yeah, I think Leipzig are the biggest shock there. Clearly a lot of talent within that squad. Of course, they've been through a bad phase in the Bundesliga as well, and Marco Rose has come under pressure. I think they have a lot of injuries as well. Also had quite a difficult... This is the thing with this format, is different teams have more favourable routes. So Celtic make it through to the last 24. They, statistically, according to Opta, had the most favourable run of fixtures. And I think Leipzig, I'm sure, were near the top for having one of the most unfavourable runs of fixtures. So that was maybe a factor, but nonetheless a surprise to see them drop out. I feel sorry for Bologna, because they got picked apart last summer in the transfer market. They lost their manager, of course. Thiago Motta goes to Juventus. They lose Joshua Zirkzee. They lose Ricardo Calafiori. And so it took them a couple months, 2 or 3 months to rediscover themselves and remold themselves under Vincenzo Italiano. Now they've done that. They're in good form in Serie A. They drew away to Sporting in their last game here. They beat Dortmund in their last match. So it felt like they came into form, but just too late for them to finish in that top 24. Other than that, to be honest, I mean, Stuttgart this season have not been the same force that they were last season, so that's maybe not so surprising. And then you look at the other teams in there. I'll just run it from 25th down to 36. So you've got Dinamo Zagreb, who actually won their match against AC Milan, still didn't make it into the top 24. You've got Stuttgart, Shakhtar Donetsk. I mean, they're playing their games outside Ukraine. That's always going to be difficult for them. I mentioned Bologna, Red Star Belgrade, Sturm Graz, Sparta Prague, RB Leipzig, Girona, who of course were excellent last season, but similar to Stuttgart, haven't been the same force this season. Red Bull Salzburg, who have been really poor this season, not just in the Champions League, but domestically. Their manager, Pep Linders, was sacked not so long ago. Then you've got Slovan Bratislava and Young Boys, the two teams to finish on 0 points from 8 games. So not a huge number of surprises there.
I mean, Young Boys kept it close with the 3 goals scored and 24 against and a negative 21 goal difference. So, yeah, maybe we weren't picking them to make it through. Joe, did you want to spend some more time pouring one out for Sturm Graz, or was there any other clubs that you wanted to talk about that will no longer be with us in the Champions League?
I mean, I have a clear beverage that I could do that. No, I mean, I don't think there's a lot more to say on those teams. Generally speaking, they are the teams that we would have thought with one or two exceptions, which is interesting and a data point for next year when we do this all over again.
All right, so that's our eliminated clubs. When we come back from break, we'll talk about the top 8. We'll talk about the playoff round and everybody who qualified. We'll talk about a few games in particular. Back soon. Welcome back to the Total Soccer Show. We continue to talk about the phase-inning phase of the Champions League, the final phase-inning phase, the phase-inning uncut. I don't know what it would be. Graham, do you have any fancy names for that one, or do you want to go straight to the top 8? You want to go straight to the top 8?
Let's do
sounds
that.
good. All right. Can you run them through very quickly?
Yes, so the top 8 in order was Liverpool. They finished top. Did they get a supporters shield or something? We should definitely introduce that. And actually,
it's more important than than winning the Champions League in the end, as Joe would say. It's winning the supporters shield, most important thing.
Yeah, people are saying that it's the best representative of a representation of a team's quality. I think that's really what people are saying. And I would argue that Liverpool are absolutely the best team at the moment. So, yeah, I feel good about that.
And that top spot did kind of flip-flop between Liverpool and Barcelona. Barcelona were playing Atalanta. That was a competitive game that finishes 2-2. Liverpool played, I wouldn't even say a B team, a C team away to PSV. Their place already secured. They lost that game, but ultimately it didn't matter because Barcelona dropped points. Liverpool
did they lose
top.
it, or did Ricardo Pepi win it?
Oh,
Ricardo
snap.
Pepi won it,
Do
baby.
it to him, Taylor.
Thank you.
So it's Liverpool, Barcelona, Arsenal, Inter, Atletico Madrid, Leverkusen, Lille and Aston Villa were the final team in that top 8. Of those 8 teams, the teams that needed a result from the final round of matches was Inter, Atleti, Leverkusen, Lille and Aston Villa. Arsenal mathematically needed something, but the way that the fixtures panned out and their goal difference, it was basically impossible for them to fall out of the top 8, which is why Mikel Arteta made a bunch of changes for that match. AC Milan losing away to Dinamo Zagreb, which I mentioned earlier, that opened the door for one of either Lille or Feyenoord to make the top 8, and they were facing each other. So I actually ended up watching, I didn't anticipate that match being one that I would keep a close eye on, but I watched more of that match than I expected. That was an entertaining one. Lille absolutely thumped Feyenoord in that one 6-1. Really impressive stuff. Inter, they needed a point to finish in the top 8, and Monaco, who they were playing, could have overtaken them. If they had beaten Inter, they would have leapfrogged Inter, potentially pushing them out of the top 8. And then the final one, Leverkusen, they needed a win to finish in the top 8, and they were playing Sparta Prague at home, and they won 2-0, so they got those 3 points. And in terms of the big losers at the top of the table, I mentioned this earlier when I got a little bit confused, AC Milan and Atalanta were the big losers. They slipped out of the top 8. They started the night in those automatic qualification spots. Milan lost away to Dinamo Zagreb. Atalanta actually got a really credible, I just mentioned it there with Barcelona, a really credible 2-2 draw away to Barcelona, and they more than held their own. There's a cracker of a goal by Ederson in that match with little quick feet and then a hammer into the corner, but
goal.
Nonetheless, it wasn't enough for them. It is a great goal. It wasn't enough for them with results going in other matches, and that is how the top 8 panned out.
Let's work backwards in that top 8 around. Let's start with Villa, Graham. How have Villa been able to finish in the top 8 in the Champions League? That is not a thing we expected. As you said, Newcastle last year, like making their return, their debut in the Champions League. They're in pot 4. It doesn't go particularly well. Villa, by comparison, basically getting a next round bye. How have they managed to pull this off?
Well, they've got Unai Emery as a manager, of course, as the European specialist. But there's something in that, right?
He just told them it was the Europa League and then they won everything? That makes sense.
Replacing all the branding at Villa Park. Nobody tell them it's a Champions League. But there is something in that. Unai Emery, the way he sets up teams, they're very good in quick transition. They can stay compact. I think they did that against Bayern Munich. They beat Bayern Munich at Villa Park, did that very effectively, then attacked open space, and they've got players that can do that. Morgan Rogers, by the way, is just getting better and better with pretty much every match he plays for Aston Villa. I ended up watching, not really through choice, just through the struggles I was having with my broadcaster here in the UK. I ended up watching more of Villa Celtic than I anticipated, but it turned out to be a really fun match, and Villa needed to better Atalanta's result away to Barcelona to finish in the top 8, which of course they did. But I found Villa very impressive. Morgan Rogers and Jacob Ramsey, the two of them, with their movement and how much dynamism they give you, and I think they reflect what Unai Emery wants from this team in the attacking third. So what I like about this format is you can't really fluke your way into a top 8 play and into a top 8 finish. Even the big teams, you have to earn your way into the top 8, and teams like Bayern Munich and Real Madrid and Man City didn't do that. What I mean by that is, in the previous format, you could get a softball draw, and if you are a Premier League team or whatever, you kind of just fall into the last 16. Aston Villa earned their way. They had some big results, they played some big teams, and they finished strongly against Celtic.
Graham, what's the better representation of Aston Villa for people who haven't watched as much of them this season? Scoring 2 goals in the first 5 minutes, letting Celtic back in with 2 goals in 2 minutes, or eventually winning the game with 2 more goals? Is it scoring early? Is it giving up maybe unnecessary goals? Or is it winning late?
I think a lot of Aston Villa fans would say the former there, where they have been a little bit more volatile than they were last season. But ultimately they just have too much attacking power. Ollie Watkins, of course, so much transfer speculation around Villa at the moment. We did our transfer window update episode yesterday, published it quickly to avoid it being out of date, and I think within about half an hour it was out of date because Arsenal had made a bid for Ollie Watkins. John Duran is away to Saudi Arabia for a deal that apparently is going to be worth 90 million euros, which is
crazy.
Kind of what I said in the show yesterday. I said surely they would need to get closer to 100 million for Aston Villa to consider that, and that's what Al Nassr did. I don't know if anyone saw the clip of John Duran from the Villa Celtic game. Where
No.
he's doing, you know that thing you used to do when you were a kid when you would put your hand in front of your face and your expression would change?
Yeah, classic.
So he was sitting on the bench and the camera person was quite clearly anticipating some sort of tension on the face of John Duran. This is potentially his last game for Aston Villa at Villa Park, and he's just sitting doing that to the camera.
That's awesome.
So he's very
smiling,
nervous.
and then so he was clearly very nervous.
Very apprehensive about that move. Joe, which top 8 finisher surprises you more, Villa or Lille?
Lille, for sure. I think we know more of the talent that Aston Villa have, and Graham detailed it really well. Lille, not a team that I would have predicted would have been in this situation, and we've already talked about it. I think Graham did a really good job of breaking this all down. They were one of the biggest movers yesterday on the whole. You go through and look at, there was a handful of teams that moved 7 spots. I think PSG went up 7 spots on the table. Monaco went down 7. Feyenoord went down 8. Then there's a couple of teams on 5, either up or down, and Lille were one of those teams that moved up 5 spots and locked into the top 8, moved into and locked into the top 8. One thing that didn't get mentioned with Aston Villa that I want to mention here for Lille, because I think they're similar, Aston Villa had great goalkeeping. I mean, Martinez was the second best goalkeeper based off of post-shot expected goals, so he saved more goals than expected than all but one other goalkeeper in this entire competition. Lille, as a unit, finished 7th in that category. They saved a handful of goals above expected. That's huge. We know this from knockout soccer. We know this from World Cups. We know this from MLS playoffs. Any sort of playoff scenario in this sport. If your goalkeeper gets hot at the right time, you have a really, really good chance to go and progress. And of course, it's not just about goalkeeping for Lille. They have legitimate attacking talent. Jonathan David is a phenomenal player and had good moments in this group stage. And we saw them basically, undress Feyenoord yesterday. They put 6 goals past Feyenoord. They have quality, especially as you go further and further into the attack. They overperformed like a madman yesterday in terms of their finishing. They did also force 2 own goals, so that doesn't show up in the XG either. But this is a Lille team with real upside because they can play the role of the underdog in a very, very real way. I don't know that means that they're going to make a deep run from here forward, but I think that helps explain some of how they got to this spot in the first place.
I watched that game, Joe, as I said earlier, and they were absolutely rampant with their off-ball movement and quick passing through the midfield into the final third. And Feyenoord, they were put in the washing machine for this game. They just couldn't handle the number of players that were coming towards them inside the penalty box, where you had runners from deep and wingers making inside-out runs and following their passes and getting 1-2s. It was incredible to watch, particularly in the second half. And they didn't even start Jonathan David in this game. Yeah. He comes off the bench, scores a very nice goal, by the way, Jonathan David. It wouldn't surprise me much if he was on the move in the last few days of this transfer window, considering he's out of contract at the end of the season.
The striker carousel is really moving right now. I love this. I'm actually quite excited about this Monday show, or whenever we're doing that transfer window show. Is going to be a lot of fun.
Well, one thing we didn't get a chance to mention yesterday, because it was reported after we finished recording, was West Ham apparently want Ricardo Pepe and have had a bid rejected.
Things are moving.
So things are moving, and Jonathan David might be part of that equation. But what Lille are doing, just to put a bow on them, they're doing, I think, is really impressive. They have a great academy. So yesterday they have a player called Bouadi starting this match in central midfield. He's only 17 years old. Joe, you mentioned the goalkeeping numbers there.
Yeah.
That's because they've got one of the best young goalkeepers in the world, a guy called Lucas Chevalier, who I can't imagine is going to be at Lille for much longer. And then their recruitment is always really smart. You look at a player called Osami Sairai. I'm definitely pronounced that incorrectly, but
I think you nailed it. I thought that was perfect, actually. No notes.
He came in from Heerenveen last summer and was great in this game. So I think there'll be a really tough matchup for someone in the last 16. They are obviously one of the underdogs of those top 8 teams, but that's not to say that they will be easy to get past.
Graham, regarding that Ricardo Pepi to West Ham rumor, it was you who broke down that West Ham is basically where strikers go to die, right?
It was, yes.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to make sure that that was the case. All right, I'm glad we're there. Joe, if we were to do an impromptu snake draft really fast, do you want it to be a snake draft or a regular draft?
I mean, I think snake drafts are just more fair, generally speaking, so I'll go snake.
All right, Joe, we'll start with you.
Okay.
Of the top 8 teams, who do you think is most likely to win the whole thing right now?
I'll still go with Liverpool because I think they're the best team. This actually does present a good time for me to raise one more criticism I have of the format. We talked about, the top spot was in jeopardy, right? Is it going to be Barcelona? Is it going to be Liverpool? It flipped some, and we've talked about that already. I didn't get the sense that it really mattered who finished on top of this. And I don't really have a good sense of if seeding matters much at all for these top 8 teams. So I look at Liverpool. There's a chance they end up with PSG at some point as they move forward here. They could play PSG in the round of 16.
Yikes.
That doesn't make me feel great. And that makes me honestly kind of want to drop down a little bit. But there aren't enough other, truly elite teams. I like Inter a lot. I've made that clear. I think Arsenal are a good team. Barcelona are a good team on their day. Leverkusen, Atleti. Like we know that those are the better teams in this top 8. But I'll go with Liverpool. But again, the seeding side of this is super messy, which is part of what makes it fun. But it also, I don't think, properly quite incentivizes the best teams to actually go out there and try to finish on the top.
I would say some of the teams that finished in the knockout playoff round would agree with you on that one, Joe. Graham, while Joe was giving you time to think, you can pick 2 teams. Who's most likely to win?
It's just me and Graham drafting. Okay, all right.
Oh, yeah.
I'll go
and channel all of my force towards Graham. All right.
Inter for my first pick, second pick overall. I just think... they've been really impressive in the Champions League this season. They've got experience. Lautaro Martinez is scoring for fun. I think he scores a hat-trick in the final game that Inter play here. So they're looking really good. I want to pick Barcelona, but it feels like a science experiment with them this season. Can you win the Champions League with basically not having a defence? So I won't be cruel to Joe because he's desperate to pick Barcelona, I think. I'll go with Atletico Madrid.
That is the correct answer. Congratulations. You've chosen correctly. And it's the club that Diego Simeone manages and the club that he is forever linked to for some reason. So Joe has Inter and Atleti, Graham has Inter and Atleti. Joe has Liverpool. Joe, you get 2 picks again.
I will pick Barcelona because I got to do it for the brand. They were not great in this game against Atalanta to do a super quick beat on them, but the first goal they score, guys, is just... It's like the defense wasn't even there. Like the ball that Lewandowski plays one touch perfectly in stride to Rafinha on that left side. If you haven't seen this goal, you have to watch it. Like this is a beautiful team goal. And it's funny because, let me finish the goal. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. It's Lewandowski who plays the ball to Rafinha. Rafinha then plays this early cross with the ball on the floor to Yamal coming in off that right side, and he ends up beating the goalkeeper and goes and scores. It's a great sequence. The other team that I'm going to pick is Bayer Leverkusen, even though I feel like Arsenal are probably the safer pick. But I want to pick Leverkusen because it helps serve my little spiel here. Because Leverkusen also scored just a delightful bit of a goal off a delightful bit of build-up in their game against Sparta Prague. It's Florian Wirtz who crashes the box late to put the ball in the back of the net. But it's Leverkusen working the ball out from the back. They end up playing through Frimpong on that right side. And he just, road runners that sucker down the right wing and drives and drives and drives and plays a perfect cut back to Wirtz. And it's like Bayer Leverkusen at their peak in that moment. I still love this team. I still think they're really, really good. Arsenal probably the safer pick, but I'll go with Leverkusen.
He road runners that sucker. That is a phenomenal phrase, Joe Lowry. Thank you for that. Graham, 2 more picks for you.
Arsenal and Villa. I'll take.
Classic Brit.
So Joe,
I've decided. No, I've decided. I want to pick Lille. I didn't end up with Lille. I hear they've got one of the best young goalkeepers in the world. I love their emphasis on youth and bringing that along, and that's definitely going to help them now and not 5 years from now. They've got an Mbappe on their bench. So I mean, what more do you need? I checks every box. I pick them. They're mine.
All right, we'll see how it plays out with our top 8 teams. We're going to take one more break. We'll come back. We'll talk about all the other many teams that are through to the next round. Back soon. Welcome back to the Total Soccer Show. It's now time for Graham Ruthven to run through the teams that finished 9 through 24 in the table and give us detailed information about their games that they played, key performers, tactical trends, adjustments that were made in game. Graham, just real quick, if you could, run it through.
Well, hold on. Before Graham starts, Taylor, don't we need to start dancing in front of the camera and obstruct the view? obstruct the viewers' view for the most part, so that they have no idea what's going on?
Every now and then, I think it would be nice to be on TV. That would be cool to, just be like a celebrity persona. And then I see the things that you have to do that, including wear b-boy chain and try to dance while talking about the table. And I think, nah, I'm good. We are going to do that at the end of this show, though. Joe has a whole dance prepared, is what I understand. Graham, dance, or you just want to run through the teams?
No, I'd rather not dance, to be honest.
Okay.
I didn't even dance at my wedding. Didn't have a first dance, so I'm not.
Well, you were too busy watching Villa, West Ham or whatever.
No, Young Boys, Red Star Belgrade, Joe.
All the way back. All right, I love that.
Anyway, let's run through the teams that finished 9th to 24th in this final round of Champions League phase matches. That feels weird to say league back to back there, but anyway, the teams were Atalanta, Dortmund, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, Milan, PSV, PSG. Benfica, Monaco, Brest, Feyenoord, Juventus, Celtic, Man City, Sporting and Club Brugge. Wow, that was a lot of teams. And the biggest jeopardy here concerned, as we've already kind of touched upon, Man City and PSG, who were playing Bruges and Stuttgart. 3 of those teams actually ended up making it through. 1 didn't, that was Stuttgart. Benfica got the win that they needed to make it through by beating Juventus 2-0 away from home. Juve are just the most confusing team in Europe at the moment. That win over Milan, where they were very impressive, feels a long time ago now. The other big team that had
impressive.
Remember,
what was it? 0? Well, never mind. Let's move on.
Anyway,
it was negative XG, Joe, to your point.
Right. Yeah, that's what I like.
One of the other big clubs that had jeopardy in this final round of games that didn't go their way was Bayern Munich. So they had Slovan Bratislava at home. They beat Bratislava 3-1, but didn't get the results elsewhere they needed to make it up into the top 8. So they'll have to play a play-in round. And then finally, the last sort of wrinkle for these teams. Joe mentioned that he didn't think the seedings mattered much for the top 8 teams. I would agree with that. I would then flip that and say seeding very much mattered for the teams in that bottom section of the table, because the way that this draw is now going to work for the play-in round, teams are bracketed together. So the best way I can explain that is the teams that finish 9th and 10th are grouped together. They will then play the teams that finished 23rd and 24th, and then you just go from there until you meet in the middle. So, for example, we know that either Man City or Celtic are going to play Real Madrid or Bayern Munich. And this draw is going to happen on Friday, by the way. But you can already see the sort of 50-50 draws for this round. So as I say, Man City or Celtic are going to play Real Madrid or Bayern Munich. And then to give another example, Feyenoord or Juve are going to play Milan or PSV. And you'll notice that there are teams from the same country there. Those barriers have been removed by UEFA. So you can now play teams from your own country in every knockout round. And that means we could have a Feyenoord PSV play-in round and a Juve Milan play-in round, which frankly I think would be pretty fun. I think that is an improvement to have more teams from the same country playing each other.
And then, just to further clarify, and then those are connected, right? So let's say you had PSV, Feyenoord, Milan, Juve, and you had Milan and PSV win those ties. It would then be Milan and PSV playing each other in the next round? Or would they then play the top 8 teams?
Yeah, the top 8 teams come into consideration there. So I can't talk through the full bracket because there's just too much complication. Sure? But looking at the bracket now, when I talk about that Celtic, Man City, Real Madrid or Bayern bracket, they would go into the bracket alongside Atletico or Leverkusen from that side of the bracket.
It's going to be very, very interesting. Joe, of the teams who finished in that sort of second tier, as we're going to call it, who did you find most surprising to not have in the top 8? Would it be City? Would it be PSG? Would it be Bayern? Would it be Dortmund or Real? It's definitely not Dortmund. I feel like Dortmund finished exactly where I thought they might.
Yeah, that's probably fair. Just outside wherever the top tier is. Isn't that Dortmund's MO these days / always?
Somehow ahead of Bayern, but yes.
Yeah, that is a wonky one. It is Real Madrid for sure. I think those, and I guess Bayern probably in that as well. There's a lot of good teams in this next round, and it does go to show that even over 8 games, we generally think that talent is the most important thing for winning soccer games and finishing high up the table. Well, it shows the quality that's in Europe, first of all, and it also shows that over 8 games, still some wonkiness can happen. It is Real Madrid, and it even took them a little bit of time to wake up. It has taken them a little bit of time to wake up, both in the league and in the Champions League. I would have expected to see them higher up in the table. Can I go back very quickly to one thing Graham said, which is, Graham, do you think it's an improvement to have more teams from the same leagues being able to play each other? I kind of get where you're coming from, because I was looking through these possible matchups in the next round, and I was thinking, man, a Milan Juve game would be kind of fun, wouldn't it? Or a PSG Feyenoord game would be kind of fun. And then I thought, wait a second, we already get to watch those. I feel like a huge part of the appeal of the Champions League for me is that we don't get to see Real Madrid play, Man City on a regular, other than every Champions League final. But we don't get to see these teams play each other from different leagues.
Yeah.
Do we really want to watch more intra-league games?
They feel different, those games, when they're in the Champions League. So I vividly remember the Champions League Classico that happened in the semi-finals, like, what was that, 10 years ago or something? I remember the Milan derby from a couple seasons ago in the semi-finals. I think this Villa-Celtic game, I know it's not a knockout match, but that'll live long in the memory for me, a kind of Battle of Britain match. So I accept your point, Joe. You wouldn't want every round to be exactly what you're watching in the league, but I still think a few more of those games would stand out and give a bit more richness to the competition.
Well, and I'm sympathetic to that, even if I think I probably just lean a different way personally, but I hear where you're coming from. I do think the big win of allowing the league, teams from the same league to play each other, is just simplicity. I know we've already talked about how the bracket is legitimately too unknown to actually detail fully, and it'll get a lot more simple tomorrow. But I do think that just not complicating it even further by saying, well, this team's going to play this team, except if they match up against a team from their same league, it does streamline things a little bit, which for us is helpful, I suppose.
I think I tend to like a clear understanding of okay, this one advanced, now they're playing the second place team from this group, and we know exactly how it's going to work. I have a feeling, though, that with this new kind of format of the way they're doing it, it doesn't make a ton of sense to me at first, and it's a little confusing as to who is playing whom and then who plays whom in the next round. But at the same time, I think that will all kind of fill out pretty quickly, and instead we're going to get a lot of really interesting matches right away. So I'm pretty excited for this one, even if it means we've got two Dutch teams playing, or French teams basically taking each other out, right? 3 of the 4 in one bracket are all French teams. So it does kind of hurt your coefficient potentially, but I think they'll probably be okay with that because it means at least one French team is making it to the next round. Graham, a team that I did not expect to be finishing very much near the bottom of the teams that advance would be Man City. As you've already outlined, they do end up beating Club Brugge. They do end up finishing 22nd, Brugge 24th, so they still also advance. Did you see anything positive from this game versus Brugge that kind of continues the positives we saw at the weekend, or was this more inconsistency for City?
I think the first half, Pep Guardiola actually got his game plan wrong, or it wasn't working, certainly. I thought Club Brugge, they were quite easy, they were quite comfortable just sitting back and then hitting on the counter. We saw that for the goal where Ferran Jutla, who, by the way, delighted to see him doing well in Belgium. He was someone that I quite liked at Barcelona. Thought he maybe should have got a few more minutes at Barcelona. Is now doing well in Bruges. But he steals the soul of Matheus Nunes for that first goal.
He
just
does.
Twists him into a pretzel and then makes a good decision with a little cutback behind the defender and then the attacking player for Bruges finishing. And after 45 minutes at that point, because that comes right on the stroke of half time, I thought City were in trouble. It didn't seem like they were creating a whole lot of opportunities. They were slow, they were laboured. I thought the way they set up with John Stones being pushed really advanced, and then Gundogan as well playing as almost like a second striker or just an out striker in this game, wasn't working. It was congesting their play. City were congesting their own play in the final third. But then Guardiola makes changes. He brings on Savinho for Gundogan at half-time. He pushes Stones into a kind of more orthodox centre-back position. And that just opened up space for City to exploit. So a lot better from them in the second half. But there was a tension. There was an edginess around this match that says to me that Man City are still not the Man City of old. They are still struggling with some problems.
It's a very, very, very strange one. Strange to have some of the teams make it to the next round, though not that strange when you have Atalanta, PSV, Benfica. Joe, of the 5 I'm going to give you, who do you think is most likely to make a run? Atalanta, PSV, Benfica, Brest, or Monaco?
Atalanta, PSV, Benfica, Brest, or Monaco. I would say probably PSV. I think they are one of the stronger teams in that group. Again, the bracketology of all this makes it really confusing, but I'm just going to ignore all of that and say, PSV or Benfica feel like the best ones there.
You said Atalanta, right, in that equation? Surely it's got to be them. I mean, I know they finished. It's the easy pick because they finished top of the 9 to 24, but they're in good form domestically and won the Europa League last season. I don't know if that counts for much, but I'm going to argue it gives them sort of European knockout experience. I think they would
Taylor,
be my pick.
Hey, Taylor, I'm going to change my answer to Atalanta. So, Graham, you got to pick somebody else, actually.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Oh, and I forgot to include Bayern on that list. So I'll take Bayern. And then Joe gets PSV. Okay, cool. I'm glad we are all on the same page about
PSV.
this one.
Oh, sorry, Taylor, you go. I was just going to say, PSV in this game against Liverpool, I know it's not Liverpool's best. They did some fun stuff. And more importantly, we already mentioned his name. Ricardo Pepi did some really fun stuff in this game. The assist that he has on the Bakayoko goal, I know I just said assist out loud as if it was a good thing, and it can be at times. The action that he completes on the Bakayoko goal is so nice. The ball is being played up to Ricardo Pepi up top as that number 9. He's sort of drifting from left to right through the center. So imagine his momentum is carrying him from left to right. And the ball is coming in. And as the ball is coming in, Pepe's aware that Bakayoko is running in, like kind of behind him. And Pepe doesn't try to take more than one touch. He just kind of like chests it away from his own body and into the path of Bakayoko, and then Bakayoko does some phenomenal work to make multiple Liverpool players miss and then fires it into the left side of the net. It's a great goal from Bakayoko, and he does most of the hard stuff. But Pepe's touch and awareness in that moment, I think of Ricardo Pepi much more of a slasher kind of number 9, where he's running in behind. He's got that sort of frame that I think fits that. He's not a super strong player, and that he's not particularly stocky. He's more lanky than stocky. And I think one part of his game that has lagged behind throughout his career is his ability with his back to goal. It's not been a real strong point for him. He has clearly been getting better at it, and this was a great example. He scores a goal later as well with the left foot, and it's him facing the goal, and he doesn't have a ton to do other than finish. It's a great finish, but it really was that play with the one-touch pass to Bakayoko that really stood out to me from what was, other than Yunus Musa getting sent off fairly early from Milan. It was a pretty nice last day of the phasing part 3, the phase uncut. It was a nice bit of that for Americans almost across the board.
Joe, what about the Reina assist? Come on, I'm looking forward to hearing the verbal gymnastics you'll use to not say, good assist, Gio Reyna.
Oh, it was. It absolutely. If we're doing good assists and bad assists,
if Reyna gets it, it's a good assist. That's how it works.
I mean, come on. It's just that simple.
I
started doing good assist, bad assist on Blue Sky. For Yunus Musa the other day against, it was Milan against, who was that?
Zagreb.
Yes. No. I'm sorry. And over the weekend. Anyway, the ball that Yunus Musa plays, is it Lecce? I don't remember. Parma, thank you. The ball that he plays, good assist. Tyler Adams assists, bad assists. That's what I've started doing on Blue Sky. The Gio Reyna assist, very much a good assist. A Gio Reyna action and a back heel is just my brand at multiple levels, so I was really, really happy with that. It's something that nobody else in the U.S. pool does, man. I've said it 1,000 times. He's different in that way. If he's actually on the field, that's a really good sign. And the other positive moment, really, from an American yesterday was Christian Pulisic scoring the only goal for Milan as they dropped out of the top 8. They were one of the big losers overall, but Pulisic continues to perform for them. That's a good moment. Yeah, as far as losers go, Milan certainly lost. Atalanta dropping out of the top 8. Both of those teams will regret yesterday, certainly.
McKinney and Weah also both starting at fullback for Juve in their loss. I don't know how much that fact, them starting where they did, led to the loss, but worth noting they were both involved, as was Richard Ledesma. Still laugh that he's referred to as Richard Ledesma. He's Richie, let's be real. He got about a half an hour for PSV. So good round for Americans overall, as Joe said, as
Not
many of them.
mentioning Austin Trusty giving away a penalty, huh? Just brushing past that.
We don't need
That's
to
what
talk about
happens
these
when
things.
CCV's not alongside him.
See? Put them together, though. You're winning the 2026 World Cup. We all know this. All right, final question for the teams that are advancing, or regarding the teams that are advancing. So we mentioned Real Madrid is in there. We mentioned Bayern Munich, Milan, Man City. Lots of very strong teams, and then some sort of like underdog scrappy teams in the form of Atalanta. Am I crazy for thinking that the team I would most want to avoid right now is PSG? Because I think in the past, PSG is a team that maybe you look at it as like, yeah, they're running with the league, they're doing fine in the group stage, but once you come to the knockout round, maybe their structure, maybe their sort of top-heavy approach isn't going to work. This season, Graham, it feels like they are pretty well poised to make a run.
It's strange to have a generally likeable PSG team that works
is.
hard, and when it comes to the crunch, like it did in the last 2 games, keep in mind they needed a result against Man City as well. It wasn't just they needed to beat Stuttgart. they got the job done, and it feels like there has been an improvement over the course of the Champions League campaign, where initially they had that control, but maybe weren't creating opportunities, or certainly weren't finishing opportunities. Now they are very much focused with those wide players, with Barcola on the left, who was absolute lightning against Stuttgart in that match. He had who was the Stuttgart right back? I can't quite remember who it was, but he had him on toast. And then you've got Desiree Doué. Yes, he had a shocker of a game because of Barcola. Yeah. And then Doué on the right side. And then even Ousmane Dembele, who I have been on this show in the past, I've said I'm not his biggest fan just because of the inconsistencies you get with him. When he is on form like he was last night, he's one of the best in his position in the world. The two finishes for his goals in this game were ridiculous. And I think his best position in this team is in that central position, where he obviously doesn't do the orthodox centre-forward thing. He's a bit more mobile and maybe drops a bit deep and has the wingers fly past him, does the sort of false nine thing. But yeah, it feels like PSG have taken a big step forward in the last couple of months. You add in Kvaratskhelia, Gonzalo Ramos is coming back from injury as well. Joao Neves is getting better and better in central midfield, so I would agree, Taylor, they would be the team I'd look to avoid in the play-in round, or whatever we're calling it.
Joe, any thoughts on PSG, or do you just want to apologize on Graham's behalf to Ousmane Dembele?
Yeah, I absolutely will. Ousmane, I'm sorry for Graham. We try to make him not say silly things, but it happens from time to time. No,
Can't do it.
If Dembele is playing like he played yesterday, and if he's playing like the Dembele that we've seen on and off for years, PSG are I don't know. I still don't know if they're the team to avoid, but man, they're in that top tier. I'm having a really hard time separating them and Bayern, who have maybe been the most dominant team so far this season across the European major leagues, and Real Madrid. Those teams are just pure nightmare fuel for all of these teams. And it's wild that we're going to get a situation where where one of Manchester City, Real Madrid, and Bayern Munich do not advance to the next round. We got to get through the next playoff bit first. But that's still kind of wild to me that we're going to see a situation where one of those teams is eliminated after this next phase. Crazy, because those teams have so much quality, and City have had a down year, and Bayern and Real Madrid slipped up just enough that they're in real jeopardy here.
Graham, any other thoughts on any of the Champions League action we have discussed or not discussed thus far?
I mean, the goal in the Red Star game was an absolute banger. I don't know if you caught it. It was a hammer into the top corner from about 30 yards, but we won't spend much longer on that dead rubber of a match, as enjoyable as that goal was.
That is fair. I think of all the teams we've discussed, if I'm doing my three that I think have a strong chance to make a deep run, if not win the whole thing, I think Liverpool was a great shout. I think Atleti have been so impressive, and just how strong they looked yesterday, just putting Salzburg to the sword, which is not a major accomplishment given how poor they have been in this competition. But I thought Cholito Simeone, once again looking very good, getting a goal, getting an assist, Antoine Griezmann getting two. They just look so good, so strong. They have that clear identity. And then PSG, I think, Graham, it is really strange to find them likable. In the past, I think I would have been kind of quietly okay if they were losing or if they were struggling and maybe things weren't going well for them. Yesterday, when they scored the goals they did, I was just sort of enjoying their performance and thought they looked really, really good. So those are the three teams I am sort of most excited to keep watching in the next round, and I look forward to doing that with you two, gentlemen.
Yeah, I often look at, when sort of assessing teams that aren't in that upper echelon, I think of the places that I wouldn't want to go to as an away team. Atleti are absolutely up there. I do not want to go to the Metropolitano. I also don't think I want to go to Villa Park. I know this is sort of an intangible thing, but Villa Park right now seems to be rocking. Yesterday against Celtic, real momentum, limbs when they scored the third and fourth goals in that game. I don't know how much that matters, but it seems like it gives Aston Villa energy. Of course, they beaten Bayern Munich at home already this season. So, yeah, Villa Park, I wouldn't want to go there if I was one of these teams in the last 24.
Joe, any other teams to discuss, or do you feel like we've summarized it all quite well?
I think we summarized it well. I want to ask you both one question.
Oh, boy.
If I give you the top 8 teams or 9 to 24, which do you want to take to pick the winner? Do you think the winner is more likely to come out of the top 8 or 9 to 24? Graham says top 8. So Graham is confident that the winner is more likely to come out of those top 8 teams, Liverpool, Barcelona, etc., versus the Atalanta, Dortmund, Madrid, Bayern, PSG kind of core. Taylor, where do you fall? Top 8 or 9 to 24?
I'll go top 8. I think mostly because Liverpool and Atleti are the two that I think of as I would feel most comfortable saying will be in the final. I don't know the format, so I'm not sure if that's actually possible. But I think of them having kind of the most strengths and the fewest vulnerabilities that come to mind. Whereas like Madrid, I think could be in that conversation, but they're not going to make any signings. I could see them having some injuries or maybe just getting caught out defensively and having problems there. Bayern, I'm still not sure if they are very good or if the rest of the Bundesliga isn't as strong. And like by contrast, Leverkusen, I think, are still sort of springing surprises, putting together good results. So who knows between the two of them. And then, City have looked vulnerable. Like PSG, I'm very excited about, but I think PSG certainly doesn't outweigh Liverpool, Atleti, Inter, and Bayer Leverkusen. So yeah, I'll go top 8.
I will as well, but if we didn't have that log jam of City, Real Madrid, and Bayern Munich in that 9-24 range, I'd be real tempted by 9-24. I think there are so many good teams coming from so many different pockets here. I'm with you guys, but man, I think it's really close.
Yep, it's exciting. It was really nice to enjoy a non-knockout round of the Champions League, even if we would normally be getting the knockout rounds right now. Still, I am pro format change. I am pro the next round, and I am pro talking about the Champions League with you, fine fellows, and Ryan Bailey when he resumes his hosting duties with his rhyming dictionary in place. For now, Joe Lowry, thank you for breaking down the final phase of the phase-inning on this phase of the Total Soccer Show.
Taylor, the phase was all mine. Thank you.
And Graham Ruffin, the same unto you.
Thank you, Taylor Rockwell.
Listeners, thank you all so much for phasing with us. We'll talk to you again next week.